All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for showing up today. For those of you who are here, tonight's guest is Jessica Odell. She is the operations manager for a really large, growing public adjusting firm, and she is a prior service Army veteran. I believe she was a major. And without further ado, we'll get quick into it here, and let's bring in Jessica.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Can you hear me just fine?
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like that
Well,
intro music, man. I was like jamming. I was like, dun,
yeah.
dun,
So,
dun.
fun fact about that, right? So, the streaming platform that we use, we pay for the royalty-free music and all that junk, right? Because I don't have the level of commitment to finding music and all that junk. And the first podcast that we did got taken down for copyright infringement because somebody said that they owned that music.
Yeah.
And so I had to dispute it. And it was the whole so everybody's hit me up. They're like, hey, we wanted to watch a podcast, but it's down. I was like, perfect. So it took like a week, almost a full week to get it back up. But then just out of spite, I've been using that music on every single intro now. So
No, it's good. I was like jamming out. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, awesome. I'm glad you had some time to jump on here tonight. I know it's
No, thanks for the invite. This was really cool. It was an honor.
Yeah. So did I have your intro right? So are you an acting PA or are you the operations manager or two hats there for Worldwide Adjusters?
Operations manager. Still PAing, of course, and building teams and teaching PAs how to be PAs and write final demands and things like that. But predominantly it's just management of the tasks, what goes on inside of a company. I've always said I really prefer being somebody's second in command versus being the one in charge. Let somebody else, go outside the business, focus on, the showmanship and getting them the streams of income or whatever, but I'll focus inside. What you want done, I'm gonna make sure it gets done. That kind of thing.
Right.
I like
and I'm in the same boat. And I think a lot of prior service folks end up in that situation, especially if they got to a point where they were in a leadership position. And obviously for you uniquely, you were an officer and you were a major, correct?
So yes, I did. I left as a major.
Did you get into an XO position or did you?
Yes. Okay. Yep, I spent some time in the XO position. I have to say probably my favorite was S3, which was the chief of ops, like ops, like just ops. I loved being director of intel for a while, but just ops in general was just, it's like every day is a different day. It fuels you. It's like this high, I don't know how else to describe it.
Well, ops is just, it does, and it's constantly evolving. You're very rarely running into the finer details that duplicate themselves. The overarching thing's relatively the same, right? Operations at its core isn't necessarily complicated. It's getting all of those other little pieces to fall in line and actually make something that's fluid, right? So I'm with you on that completely. There are times where you kind of miss that moment of time where you were the boss, right? And there was nobody else with you or above you where you could just be like, no, I kind of have the final say here and this is the way that it needs to be. But generally speaking, it's definitely where I fall in is operational stuff. I thrive in that area a whole lot easier and I'm happier, right? As stressful as it is sometimes, I think you just kind of grit your teeth and say, okay, this is what it is. And we're just gonna keep moving, and you start maneuvering the pieces around. And so I think it fits for a lot of prior service folks for sure. And, one of the unique things about you, again, most of the people that we talk to, well, I know everybody that's been on the show so far, and
hey, James.
most of the people that we have scheduled all served in an enlisted capacity, right? So you're kind of the anomaly there in that there is a separation between the commission and the enlisted side. I was talking to a friend of mine over last weekend. I was at a wedding, and he was a captain, and he was a ranger, but he wasn't a ranger bat. But he was like, man, I never got any bonuses. I never did this. I never did that. And it had been so far removed from it that I was like, what do you mean you didn't get a bonus? Like, we were at war when we served. Like, they were offering big ass bonuses, and then it clicked, and I was like, oh no, you were an officer, so you had your commission, and that was it.
What's crazier too is you had to walk out with lots of student loans if you didn't get your full commission through in any other way. Like some officers that I went to college with, they were prior service and used their GI Bill. So
right,
that is
green to gold or something.
A fantastic way to go. I didn't have it. I went straight into college, and I said, this isn't enough. I want to be a part of something even bigger. And the military just felt right. I grew up a military brat anyway, so it was just, I kind of already knew what I was getting into.
Right.
So yeah, I walked out with tens of thousands in student loans, and there was no bonuses to cover those.
They don't reimburse for that?
Nope.
Really? See, I did not know that. Because when you're on the enlisted side, there's a constant push of, you can take all this free college while you're in, right? And you should. Nobody fucking does,
right?
But they do. They push it, and then, but kind of leaving. And even there was like a student loan forgiveness program that existed early in the war, like the 03 to 08, where we used to get a bunch of Joes in who had college degrees in their E3s and E4s. And it's like, why didn't you go commission? Like, they're like, my recruiter didn't tell me I could. Huh? Okay. Yeah. You just kind of missed the boat on that one, but.
Yep. But I got to say, where I did get spoiled was I did get my master's covered, because for the first time, at least while I was in, they offered to cover tuition for officers to get their continuing education. So I was like, I am not missing that opportunity. I'm going to go get my master's. So that I did get some educational benefits down the road. So
now I've seen a few folks take a bunch of different routes to that, right? So one of the guys that I think he joined probably right after September 11th ish. And he ended up going green to gold. He made a D4 and then went green to gold. And now he's still in. He's a major now. And so he went that route, and it's worked phenomenally for him. I know my brother enlisted in the Air Force and made it to E5. And my vague representation of my memory here was he called me and he's like, hey, I got promoted today. And I'm like, oh, cool. You made tech sergeant. He said, well, no, I made lieutenant. And I'm like, that's not how this works. And he said, it does. He goes, it does in the Air Force. They still do direct commissioning, non-combat related. And I was like, what the fuck? And so now he's a major in the Air Force, and he works. He does work for Rubowski Consulting on a bunch of our coursework stuff and Xactimate classes and a bunch of other stuff. He's one of the smartest people I've ever ran across in my life. And but you see how a bunch of different avenues kind of dictate where people end up, and it's interesting how people. And the whole point of this podcast when I thought it up, was to bring in a bunch of people who I know served and are now not necessarily working for a business, but they're in that like C-level position, or they are the owner or the operations manager at a national level, that kind of stuff. And I know I talked about it when TJ Ware was on, but there's a ton of these dudes who are operators in special operations community, the Green Berets and the SEALs and team guys that are like your super great motivational speakers. They can get up there and tell you to make your bed and run 35 miles in the morning and read 14 books by noon and all that. There's not somebody that's kind of that everyday. These are the skills I learned. This is how I now apply them now that I've gotten out. And as much of a anti-veteran as I was for so many years, because I despised that. Thank you for your service. I despised people using the knowledge that I had military service or the 4 deployments or whatever as some sort of linchpin to who I was. Like, I really made a conscious effort to separate that. The older that I'm getting, I'm realizing that there's a use and a tool there that I need to be pushing out to people. So, and in the last 2 years, I've found myself in a position where I can actually push that information out to people, where 3-4 years ago, I didn't exist, as far as at least our industry goes. So I thought it was important to find people like me, like you, like some of these other guests that, how did you end up here? Like, you, at some point you made a decision to either you got to retirement time or you got out. And what did that look like to get to where you're at now? Because I know just from our conversations in the past that you are happy where you're at.
Oh yeah.
You are motivated to be where you're at. You feel like you've landed in a good place. So how did you get from, because did you retire? Did you?
No. So I did 15 years, and then
Okay.
fibromyalgia started surfacing, and so I had some health issues, and they were like, nope, straight to the board. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I've got 5 years left. But it worked out really well. So then I left that, and I said, okay, well, I'm still going to stay. So part of my career I did active duty, and then the other part of my career I did National Guard.
Okay.
So when I left, I was already still doing the Department of Defense contractor thing because I was a part of the Guard. So I did both of those. So I still got to have that military itch for a little while, even after I got completely out, because I was Department of Defense contractor. So I was traveling all over to, all the different, theater commands, and we were teaching courses,
right.
and we were getting into planning, and we were dusting off war plans and war gaming on tables and whiteboards. And, oh my God, it was awesome.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just got to recognize the unseen wounds, I guess you could say, those health problems that they don't define you, but you might need to modify your life and your work a little bit so you can keep going.
I don't know that there's a more accurate statement, because I think that's it. It's really about, they're not going away. Right. So you have to find a way to manage them on a daily. And I wish somebody would have kind of said that to me in 2012.
It's okay to do that. Yeah. Nobody told me that either. And I struggled for
2 or 3 years before I felt like I was at least a functional member of society.
Right.
And then it took probably another 5 before I was like confident that I could put myself back into a position where there was a certain responsibility level, or it was physically taxing, or, I've chased hurricanes for the last 5 or 6 years. You're not going into an environment like that where without being cool and being in that austere situation. Right. And your body has to be able to keep up with you at that point too. And sometimes it just doesn't want to,
right.
Sometimes you don't want to get out of bed. Sometimes you don't want to go to bed,
it was getting to a point, 2018, 2019-ish, where I wasn't ready to be, and I don't mean this to sound like a negative way. I don't have anything against those who are disabled and are not working, but I wasn't ready yet. I still felt like I just need to find this balance with this disability to still use what I can to keep working until I legit could not work anymore. So that was where I was burning through sick leave, trying to do the normal 9 to 5. Just being confined in that time. If I could, modify some things and then work again and pick it back up in the evening, I could still be a workhorse. So, but it took me a while to figure out, well, what job allows you to do that? Because remember, I left prior to COVID. So now everybody's doing what I was, kind of worried or concerned over. But it was trying to strike that balance, work from home somehow, but still, put in good hours, because that's where I wanted to be, is in a fight somewhere, somehow doing something. But it was really my uncle. My uncle was a public adjuster out in Florida or actually along he was in New Jersey for a little while and then moved on down to Florida, but he worked hurricanes for 30 years. So that guy, old school, one of the first, groups of PAs, to really, in our recent history, that's what he did. And he called me up out of the blue right before Hurricane Harvey hit Texas. And he said, "Hey, you're in San Antonio, aren't you?" I said, yeah, I'm in San Antonio. Why? What's up? He says, "Hey, I want to come see you and hang out for a couple of days. And then when they give the all clear that people can come in after the hurricane hits, then I'll go down to, wherever this thing hits." And I was like, wait, what is it that you do again? Because I thought he did appraisals in terms of I have this really nice artwork and I need to find out what kind of value it holds, or I have this property.
I could see that getting misconstrued.
I thought it was that kind of, and he says, no, I'm a public insurance adjuster. It's like, I put valuations to losses when losses happen. And I was like, kind of dismissed it at first, but then because that was, I think, 2018. 2019, I was like,
no, Harvey was 17.
17. Yeah. That's right. So 18, the end of 2018, September timeframe ish was when I really started. It just really hit me. I cannot do a normal 9 to 5, but I have so much left to give. So what out there can I do and still be a member of society and making, a living for my kids and husband and whatever.
Yeah.
So that I really started taking a look at public adjusting September 2018. By February, because when I research stuff, I don't just like research and then come back to it. Like I will research something to
you're gonna figure it out. Yeah.
Army intelligence, background is probably to blame, but I will research something to death, and when I finally put all those puzzle pieces together, I will stand by a decision, and I did, and I briefed the husband kind of what I was doing, and he was like, "This is great. I will support you in doing this." That's the other thing is having a supportive spouse.
Yeah, I tell you, Amy has been through the ringer with me. God bless that woman. She to this day puts up with my shit and whatever wild ass ideas I come up with, right? And having that support is probably what a lot of people are missing when you see them struggling in that space like that. 100%. But yeah, I mean, that in itself is invaluable, right? And you can't replace that. And it takes a special kind of person to be able to do that. And so when you see these long-standing relationships between a service member and their spouse, and it works, that there is car crashes and speed bumps and potholes and all those things along the way. And then you see the way that they love each other as people, and you can't compare that, right?
No, like you can't.
It's not to say that type of love doesn't exist somewhere else, but it's a unique type of love that exists between people who are willing to put themselves in that spot, because it's not like it's unknown to you, right? The shit show exists. You sat there and stared at it for a little while, and you're like, yeah, I'll jump in there. Like, so.
Yeah. So he was like, you know what? Let's do it. Yeah. He was on board. So that gave me that extra little bit of confidence to go into the unknown. So a lot of public adjusters and a lot of folks in our industry come from some kind of construction background, or maybe they were former insurance professionals and made the switch. I knew my capabilities. I knew, being highly analytical and being a do-it-yourselfer. Yeah, he's got landmines. That's funny, James. Hubby and I've always been like do-it-yourselfer, interior construction. So I didn't have a lot of commercial type construction background when I first started. Mostly just residential. So, but anyway, long story short, I just felt like the ambition was there. Right. And I knew that I would have a little bit of a learning curve, more than maybe some other newbie PAs, public adjusters. But I didn't want to let that stop me. I knew that I could learn it, and I could learn it pretty quick. So I did. I just made the leap, and I will tell you, some people have told me that you will make a crappy public adjuster if you have no background. Like, nobody can come into this industry not knowing, not either being a contractor or insurance professional. And while I see where they may be coming from, I think that I was dismissed a little too early.
Well, you had a couple things working against you, if we're being honest, right? Let's call it what it is. One, you're a woman. But and two,
they didn't know my military background either.
And so that cancels out the rest of them, right?
Yes. So my gut told me I could do this. Now that also I had to rely on going and getting and finding training. Like, I think what you're a part of and what you're doing with training and stuff is fantastic. That was kind of missing back in 2018 when I was first researching, and started surfacing in 2019, with Cal Spoon and Melanie Spoon and Sean Hodge doing the public adjuster boot camp. They kind of did some beta seminars in there that first year in 2019, which I got to be a part of. And that was my intro. So I kind of felt like they already gave me a solid foundation right off the bat.
Especially for Texas, right?
Yes. 100%.
I've always told people, because I've been in and out of the industry since 2014. I've always told people, if Texas and Florida do something, you can pretty much see the rest of the country fall in somewhat a line. And what Cal and them do down there, I don't care how you feel about it. Right. It is a platform and it's educational. And if anything we learned in the military was you're going to learn from people that you disagree with just as much as you agree with, but you're going to learn. Yep. Right. And I don't know that I've ever met anybody who's come out of Cal's camp that was like, oh, this is bullshit. Right. Yeah. It's everybody's come out going, man, there was so much information there. I may not apply those skills the same way that they are teaching them, but I've learned a way. Right. And that in itself, again, as we've learned in the military so many times, just you can't stand still. You've got to move. And at least they're giving you a platform to move. I have nothing but respect for them. I've never attended their stuff. I kind of fell into the PA thing by happenstance. So,
what is this thing?
Well, I mean, I started knocking doors as a roofer. I was a roofing salesman, and I am a horrible salesman. And then the roofing company that I was working for went under. And then it became, okay, we're going to jump off into the mitigation space and chasing hurricanes and stuff like that. And then it was, hey, can you write estimates? And I was like, never done it, but I'll give it a run. And got put on.
That's the attitude to have. 100% the attitude to have.
Yeah. And then I got put on a bunch of massive estimates that were way outside my skill set at the time. And half of them went to court and got approved. And I was like, are we sure? Because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing when I wrote it. And that kind of stuck around. And then I saw a discrepancy in where I was working. It was like, if I go do the PA thing, I can help advocate for you guys to actually get your bills paid. Right. And that's obviously the very surmised version of that scenario, but that's how I landed here. And I tell people to this day, like, I'm a shitty PA. I'm really good at operations and I'll go toe to toe with anybody in the country when it comes to estimating, but I know what I know, and I'm going to live in that space, right? And you just surround yourself with other good people who know what the hell they're doing. And both of the Jameses on here are a perfect example of me not knowing that space and saying, hey, you guys know this space. Come on in, right? So, there you go. So I didn't realize, were you guys at the same class? I know he went to the boot camp there.
So he wasn't in I don't think he was in the one that I went to the full 5-day course, but it was probably one of those betas or one of the seminars. It's kind of blurry. The last couple of years have been blurry because 2 hurricane seasons could do that to you.
Well, you wouldn't recognize him today. Just saying.
Why is that?
He's about half the size that he was.
Oh, good for you. Good for you, Jay. Hey, I had, full disclosure, I had gastric sleeve too. I'm not quite half, but
so did I. So James, me, my wife, James Strange, his wife, Wallington. Like we're this weird group of people who have all had that done, and we run it, and it's kind of worked to my advantage.
Turns your life around, doesn't it?
Yeah, James said everybody in the DFW office for Coastal, the entire office.
James Strange, everybody, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because it's actually worked to my advantage because there's some people over the few, last 5 or 6 years that I've absolutely pissed off. And like, we kind of went head to head and it's like, if we ever get in a room together, we're going to have a major problem again. And then I've passed these people. They don't even recognize me. And I'm like, all right, cool.
Alternate facade or what? Yeah. That was part of the, that fibromyalgia struggle. I also had a pituitary cyst in my brain. So they said it was not an actual brain tumor, even though I used to go into the office and say, it's just a tumor.
That's right.
It was a cyst, and it was on the pituitary. But what it was doing was it was causing a lot of inflammation and swelling of the pituitary. And if you know anything about the pituitary gland, it governs all hormones. Mm-hmm. And my hormones were nuts. And I gained 80 pounds I gained 60 in 3 months. And then the last 20 came on like over a course of a couple months. No change in diet, no change in exercise, no change in anything, just blew up. And I knew something was wrong. And then I just kept getting, these fibro flare-ups. And it took a while to diagnose because now there's a ton of research on it. They say it's part of your central nervous system. And that's part of the issue. Mm-hmm. Back then, they were still like, we just call it fibro if we don't know what it is. But I had a neurologist who helped me out, and who helped identify it. And then when I took that information to my primary care physician, he was like, I 100% can see where this is. yep, let's try it. And I got my whole life back. Once I got the,
and that's, you want to talk about a segue, right? I mean, that, every service member struggles with the mental transition out, right? Because you go through such structure to the Wild West, right? And and everybody knows historically the VA is shit.
I was on 12 medications, and TJ, I think he said he was on like 13 or 14. I chimed in. I was like, I was on 12. What is up with this? This cannot be the new norm.
So I avoided medication like the plague because, so I had 3 TBIs, and then, so the way that they rated me, and I'll speak candidly about it, I don't give a shit. So it was social anxiety disorder with post-combat headaches. And I was like, do you guys read what the fuck you just wrote? Because like, that doesn't make sense.
No.
And it was a 30% rating. So 3 TBIs and PTSD was a 30% rating.
That's
so
awful.
It took me from 2012 to 2018. They finally upped it. They acknowledged the post-concussion 3 TBI, PTSD with chronic headaches, blah, 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 blah. Like, I mean, it's a goddamn paragraph just for that one rating, but it's a 70% by itself.
Yeah.
So, you see some of that stuff. And then even then I was avoiding medication. They're like, well, what do you do to monitor your headaches? I'm like, Motrin. Like, I don't want you guys to put me on stuff. Yeah. Because I don't do narcotics. I will not do them. And so like, even there's been a couple times since I've had surgeries since I got out, and Amy knows, like, hey, don't give him codeine. Don't give him morphine. Like, don't do it. He's not. And so now it's gotten to the point where I think age has something to do with it, right? Where you're just like, I'm getting old as shit. My body's not recovering from things as well. And so now like my back issues, and I have some level of nerve paralysis in both arms and both legs.
Yeah, mine's both arms. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I think when the last nerve conduction study they did, it was like 92 or 96% paralyzed the ulnar nerve in my right.
Ulnar nerve, yes, that's mine too.
And then like 80, high 80s, like 87% paralyzed the medial nerve in my left. I'm like, how is it 2 different nerves on each side?
But yeah, that's different discs and everything.
So now they're like, you need gabapentin. And I was like, you know what? I'm at the point now, I'm tired of dealing with this. I'll try whatever you guys want to give me. And they said they wanted to do that because it helped with the nerve damage, but it also helped with PTSD and anxiety. And I was like, okay, I'll give this a run. We'll see how it goes. The dose that they put me on, I literally probably 3-4 months ago, I sat my wife down outside and I was like, I'm this close to having a mental breakdown. For the first time in my life, I literally feel like everything is closing in around me. And so I talked to my doc and she's like, well, this isn't really, and this is where the VA just absolutely is awful. She's like, this isn't really one of those appointments where we talk about the problems. I just need to know if you need to adjust your medication. And I'm like, well, how do you know what to adjust my medication to if you don't talk to me about the fucking problem?
Yes.
Right. Yes. So I just adjusted it on my own and sent him an email and said, I've reduced this to about 10% of what you were giving me. And now it's manageable.
Yeah.
Right.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I don't like taking all the shit they give me.
Right.
But because now I think I'm on 3. I'm on 3 medications now.
Good.
One of them's a Meprazole, right? Because heartburn and whatever. But I had to have a Nissen fundoplication done where they take a big chunk of your esophagus out because it eroded.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. So but anyway, they push medication on so many people.
Yep.
And I know guys,
like you said, you cannot function when you're on that many. You can't.
No. And I'll be completely honest with you. Like I would, for years, it was the same 5 or 6 things that went through my head every night when I go to sleep, same 5 or 6 nightmares. And then I would wake up in sweats and there was and all that stuff.
I thought I was going through early menopause. But at night.
I remember asking Amy, I was like, can men go through menopause? Because this is all fucked up. Like there's something not right here. And she said, no, but there's something going on.
Yep.
And I remember getting to a point where I was like, I don't want to take the medication that they're giving me because it's a blanket, right? Like
it's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It's all it is, a little Band-Aid until.
Yeah. And so then it's like, all right, what do I do to sleep? Because you just boil a bunch of shit down, right? You boil down, if you're not sleeping well, you could be as healthy as an ox everywhere else, and nothing's working, right? You have to get sleep. And so, I mean, I have my Florida medical card and I live in Texas, so figure that out. But, kids go to bed, I go eat a gummy hits, I go to sleep. And I sleep through the night.
Yeah. Do you melt? Like do you melt into the bed?
No, now that depends. Depends on which gummy you eat.
Okay.
But, so I don't do indicas because of that. Like there's the old joke, indica means into couch, like you're not leaving the couch. Okay. Those are the ones that just kind of make you melt, and you're like, you can hear your heartbeat and shit. I'm like, no, I don't need all that. Like, yeah. So I get ones that just take the edge off.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. Like you could walk. I mean, there's been plenty of times where my wife's looked at me and she's like, did you have a gummy tonight? Like you can't tell that I took one. Like it's not one of those like lazy eye, like just kind of, hey man, like it's not like that at all. Now I'm sure if I like pop 2 or 3 of them, I'd be sitting there doing that. But I do it just enough to take the edge off, slow my brain down a little bit, and then I sleep just fine.
And it's 100% natural. It's not lab created and yeah. No, that's good.
I've heard some of these things that these people get prescribed, and I'm like, how are you? No wonder you can't get a job. No wonder you're not functioning. Yes. No wonder your kids got taken away. No wonder, like, there's so many systemic problems that especially the VA will just medicate to solve, but they're not taking into account the outside factors that exist in these people's lives. Like you've been to the VA, the first 3 questions they ask you, are you planning on, have you recently wanted to hurt yourself?
Hurt yourself.
Are you planning on hurting other people? No. Are you the risk of being homeless?
Right.
No. So I guess those 3
so you're fine.
things,
Let me just
totally fine.
You're totally fine. Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of circle back on a few things. So did you find a 9-to-5 job? I know you said 9 to 5. When I say 9 to 5, like salaried paycheck, like $20 an hour, 8 to 4 every day. Did you do any of that when you got out?
Nope. I just, at that point, what I thought I was going to end up doing was maybe just getting my realtor license, and then that way I could manage some hours a little bit and still try to have an income. And but anyway, at that time though, in San Antonio's market, like everybody and their mother was moving from California to Texas, in the San Antonio, Austin area. And all of a sudden realtors were coming out of the woodworks everywhere. I mean, everybody was going to get in the real estate license. And I was like, oh, I don't want to just be another member or another number in this big, massive pile. Like I need something else. I need something more. And again, so when I had conducted that research on, what we do in this industry in general, not just as public adjusters, but just in general. And just considering, hurricanes come to the Texas coast or the Louisiana coast, and I can travel to those places. So I thought, you know what, that's actually, that's a great idea for, a transition job for a veteran who still kind of yearns that deployment feel every once in a while, and just I'm going into the fight, not running out of it. This thing just hit, because we can go and be like, man, I have lived this. I don't have to have a shower for 14 days because I know how to use baby wipes and live out of my truck and do all,
Yep.
Like,
so what's the longest you've ever went without a shower? Let's say in combat. So it's not like on a Tuesday at the gym, like you just skip a shower, like, because let's back up. How many times did you deploy? I know you did at least one.
So I did one deployment, and I was also out in Korea. So I was up on the DMZ some. That's unclassified. So doing stuff up there in the mountains.
Yeah.
I think 14 days probably was. Yeah, 14 days was probably the longest time I went without a shower.
The only reason I know the answer to this question. Man. Oh yeah. The only reason I know the answer to this question is because it got brought up at a buddy of mine's wedding, and I was with him when it happened. And at the reception, the bride and groom, they did questions. They were like, trivia questions or whatever. And one of the questions was like, how long what's the longest Michael's ever been without a shower? And I was listening to all these people that are like 7 days and like 10 days. And I'm like,
2
no,
days, 3.
I was like 28 days this fool went without a shower because I was with him. And they're like, 28 days, what the hell happened to you guys? And we're at a wedding. We're not going into the bullshit, right? But
yeah.
I'll tell the very Cliff Notey version of this story. So before BIOP got taken over in 2003, we were, I was a fueler. So we had to set up the forward area refueling points, right? So they jumped us out and we were on a small team, got jumped out. So third ID and the 101st could roll through and take over BIOP, right? Well, our lieutenant didn't refill the radios on Wednesday at changeover. So by the time we got to where we were going, he couldn't send back our grid coordinates.
Yes.
And he let it ride for 4 days before he told anybody. You want to talk about somebody about to get friendly fired, right? And so coincidentally,
so he didn't just own it and report back like, "Yo, I've effed up."
Nope,
and this, no, he just
he tried to hide it. And then by the time we got to a point, every time we tried to leave, we were attacked because we were just on the south side of Baghdad in March of 2003, right? This is not something that like now where there's all these, different bases or whatever.
Right. Settlements everywhere. And
this was
repeater towers and all those other things.
Go down the street. Hey, we're getting shot at. Now we only had our basic load, right? So you can only do so much with that. Yeah. And so we'd go out, get shot at, come back. We'd go out, get shot at, come back. We're like, shit, man, this sucks. And then coincidentally, a Black Hawk flew over and we set off a couple pen flares and he just like circled back around and he landed middle of the day. And we're out there in like our PT shorts, boots, vests on, hadn't shaved in a month. And then he's like, what the fuck's going on with you guys? We're like, do you have any water? Because we only had 3 days worth of rations when we left. And, talk about spanning some shit out.
Yeah.
And so LT jumped in the bird, called our command. The next morning they came and picked us all up. And I mean, shit show. But we went I guess technically it would have been 29 days without a shower. But yeah, it was a disaster. Absolute disaster.
That's nuts.
Anyway, the reason I asked when you got out, if you had done that like scheduled 9 to 5 type job, I did it once and I got a job when I first, not when I first got out. God, I don't even remember what year it was, but I was working for the Army Corps of Engineers and I got fired for violating Department of Homeland Security protocols.
I definitely got to hear this one.
It is the most minor bullshit you've ever heard in your life. Amy's schedule and my schedule were off by an hour, right? So I had to be at work an hour before she got off work. And so Cooper, our youngest, came with me. I got it cleared by my boss, came with me to the lock and dam on the river. And I took some pictures of him out there. Nobody told me that I couldn't. Whatever. Fast forward like 3 or 4 months, one of the chicks that works in the office saw it on Facebook or whatever, reported me to HRC, and I was fired on the spot. And my SF-50 says unhireable for future federal jobs.
Wow.
Can't make this shit up.
Wow.
So in my brain, I was like, well, I gave the whole like have a real kid job thing a shot.
I gave it a chance and it didn't work.
So here we are. And so again, go roll back to having a good support system. I came home from just getting fired and Amy's like, shouldn't you be at work? And I'm like, yeah, so cool story. Had to tell her what happened. And I fully expected this like blow up of like, oh my God, how the fuck did you let this happen? She had been so used to my horse shit at that point. Her response was, okay. What are we going to do now?
Right. Yeah.
It
happened. What are we going to do? Yeah. So, let's make the best of it. Plan forward.
Yeah. But I gave it a try. Because, you go and work a federal job that carries over your retirement. And once I landed that job, I was like, cool, I'm going to ride this out. I made $29 an hour on a normal shift and like 37 on the weekends. Like it was decent money. And when I lost it, I was like, well, fuck, maybe I'm not supposed to do it like this. And then it took a while to shift my brain because I was so used to being under somebody's command, so to speak. Right. To being able to just step out there and then say, hey, this is the skill set that I have. I'm going to find a place for me to land here.
Yes.
That I can utilize that. And, luckily for me, I navigated my way around and landed where I needed to be. So
I kind of take that back when you were saying when you left. So yes, when I left active duty, I was doing the Guard and Department of Defense contracting. But even in that Department of Defense job that I had, while a large majority of the time it was in a cubicle and it was your normal 9 to 5, there was still a lot of times we got to travel to other combatant commands. So, I used to, go out to Korea, Japan, Germany. Man, I love Germany. We got to go all over the place. So it was...
Never been.
Oh, Bavaria country. That's my favorite.
So my brother went from Germany to Hawaii. So he ended up extending for a year, 4 years in Germany, and then straight to Hawaii. And I'm like, all I ever did was Kentucky to Iraq, Kentucky to Afghanistan, Kentucky.
Like, how did I get screwed?
I never came off dwell time until from 2001 to 2011. I didn't come off dwell time.
When you were Marine Corps, right? Were you Marine Corps?
I was Army. No, I was Army.
You were Army. Oh, yeah, that's weird.
Don't put that voodoo on me. Like,
oh yeah, that is strange because I was Army and man, I was all over.
Well, but no, I got out. I was in basic, and I know I cut off your story, and we'll get back to it. But I went to basic in August of 01. Towers fell September of 01.
Oh.
I arrived at Fort Campbell December of 01. We were on orders. My unit fell off orders because they were putting, I was in an Apache battalion. They were doing the longbow transition. So we were the first in line for Iraq in 03. So I went 03 to Iraq, home in 04, 05 in Iraq, home in 06, 08 in Afghanistan, home in 09, and then gone again to Iraq in 09, came home in 10. So dwell time landed May of 11. My dwell time ended. Mid-May 11, they said, hey, you're going to Colorado. And I was like, what? I want to stay here because my unit was getting prepped for another deployment. I wanted to do 5 because I'm an idiot. And they said, nope, you're going to Fort Carson. And as soon as I got to Fort Carson, they started medical on me to send me out. And I got out in 12. And I was like, if you assholes would just let me stay at Fort Campbell.
Right. Where you wanted to be in the first place. Yeah.
But I never came off a dwell time until May of 2011. So everybody's like, oh, I traveled the world. I got to go to Korea. I got to go to Germany. I did this. I did that. I'm like, no, I did Kentucky.
I stayed deployed and went to Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, but I loved it. Like, it didn't even bother me. And looking back at it in hindsight, I wish I would have got to do some more of the traveling. But
right.
So my only stops in Germany were in Frankfurt, in and out of theater.
Oh. So. Yeah, that's not Germany.
No, especially after my brother. And then when my brother was out there, we were going to go, and then COVID hit. And every time the U.S. kind of relaxed, Europe would close back down. And you're like, well, all right, I guess we're not going. So we never did go.
I think what COVID did for our industry in general just really showed a lot of people that you can do a lot of this work remote. As long as you have teams, your teams, you can do this remote. And I really do feel like there is a place in this industry for every type of veteran, like personality type. Because you've got desk side of things where that can be done remote. You're drafting your arguments, you're pulling data, you're requesting data, you already know, more or less what needs to be in a claim file, that kind of thing. So that speaks to a large majority of veterans as well. And then of course there's the field side of things too, where you can get out there and you can sweat and find damage. Now we have technology that helps us find damage that we can't see with the naked eye. There's, I feel like this is such a perfect industry for a transitioning veteran. And with growing worldwide, like that is definitely a talent pool we're going to tap into. Because they understand, and they understand. It's easy for them to grasp and understand not just a claims process, but just processes in general. Yes, processes in general. Yeah. When I hit these 12 hurricane damaged homes, I have a system that I can repeat over all 12 structures,
over and
so
again.
There's consistency in the documentation of a claim. And it's just one of those things. Oh man, this is easy. Like, I've got my steps and it's just,
and that's
it's already ingrained.
there's something there that you did somewhere in your military service, whether you were an E1 or 06, like there's something in the process. And I've always ended up being a teacher in some capacity, which you couldn't have asked me 20 years ago if that was going to be the thing, because I don't like people, and I definitely don't like talking to people very much. And that's evolved over the years. Right. But I mean, I used to teach flight line operations for division level certification in the 101st. I taught drown proofing. I was a small arms master gunner. I was always teaching. And then when I got out, I was like, I'm not teaching anymore. So then, like, when I met Matt Mulholland and those guys, and they're like, hey, do you want to come out here and teach? I was like, fuck yes, I do. Let's figure this out. And my point in that is that that wasn't an MOS related skill. That wasn't something that you learned in basic training. It was hey, we need a person, see a need, fill a need. It was like, hey, we need somebody to teach this class. And like the flight line operations
to the wolves.
The flight line operations class, they were like, hey, we need somebody who can go out and teach this class. Here's the PowerPoint. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. They didn't tell you in the front end that you're teaching as many people in the division that they can put through there at 450 to 700 people at a time.
Oh, and by the way, tomorrow.
Yes, and tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
And you want to talk, so that's a really good one, because I stress Mulholland out all the time, because he's like, hey, is your class ready yet? Do you have all this done for your class? I'm like, it'll be done tomorrow. Like, and even no matter what we're doing, if there's something that needs to be prepped, it'll get done.
If I say it's going to be done tomorrow,
he's a pre-planner. He's like, it has to be done 3 or 4 weeks in advance. So it's interesting though. I mean, and I think that's the hard part. And I watched a thing I don't remember who it was, but they were saying, they're like, service members getting out are groomed to be entrepreneurs. They just don't know it, because they're so
that
used
took
to
me years to realize. You're absolutely right. That took me several years to realize.
Because again, doesn't matter if you're E1 or an 06, doesn't matter. Inevitably, in the course of your military service, you ended up in a spot where you had to figure the fuck out on your own.
Yes.
With a group of other people who had also no idea what the hell they were doing. And so, I always joke with people,
sticks to get across that river.
Yeah, I always tell people, when I went to OIF1, the guys that, now unless they went to Afghanistan, right, which most of those guys did I'm talking 01 Afghanistan. So
gotcha.
if you did,
no sewage, no electricity, no nothing.
Right. So unless you went to 01 Afghanistan, happened to get mobilized to the 101st, 3rd ID or whatever, and then immediately jumped back into Iraq, which it happened for a few people, but it's an anomaly. I remember sitting in the theater briefings and looking around, and my buddy Crickman and I looked at him and I said, none of these assholes have ever done this. Like, we're about to go into combat.
Spearhead,
and at that point,
the tip of the spear, not just the spearhead, but the tip of the spear.
At that point, the Republican Guard still existed. And they're like, and then we're listening to the radio, BBC radio is like, the 101st Airborne's in Baghdad today. And we're all looking at each other and we're like, where's Kuwait? Like, are we missing something? And then, they didn't know what day we were going to cross the border and all this other stuff. And we're sitting in the GAC lines on March 18th, all sitting there staring at each other going, hey, have anybody here ever done this? And they're like, nope.
What's cool about that though? We're so used to having standard operating procedures, having things written out for us to use as a guide. And then we all get pissed off and frustrated when there's nothing in place.
Yeah.
You're given this shit show, you're given a mission, and then you all just scrambling. Nothing is going right. But in the end, you got the mission accomplished anyway. And then you sit back and you're like, holy shit, we just did that.
Yep.
We just did. And we didn't have everything handed to us. It wasn't, there was nothing done perfect. You want that, your brain's process. I want it to be this way. That's the standard. When you don't have that and you're like, that's all right. We'll still we got this. We will still figure this shit out.
SOPs
and it'll be good in the end.
Yeah. And SOPs, generally speaking, worked well in garrison. As soon as you went on a field problem or a deployment, you just throw them out the fucking window. Right.
Yep. They're there for the nice tidbits of information every once in a while. But for the most part, it's your gut. It's your gut. It's your heart. It's your brain. And it's the team. Mm-hmm. And everybody. Yeah.
And that's where, when I said a minute ago that service members are being groomed to be entrepreneurs. What they're used to is the garrison mindset, right? It is the PT at 6:30, work call at 9, go PMCS your trucks, blah, 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 whatever fucking task you have for the day, right? They're not looking at the, hey, we have a field problem that we had to go do, or we had to do, we went on a deployment and nobody was making sure that there was enough MREs and water. Nobody made sure the fuel was sorted out. What do you mean we're just driving across the desert? Like, it was, you just had to be able to adapt to those things and maneuver. It's almost like once that happens and that event is over, you do the brain dump and go back to the garrison mentality.
Well, and more James hit the nail on the head. You know, he's like, when you realize everything was so messed up in the middle,
yep,
and you still managed to pull it off. And oh, by the way, it wasn't just, okay, I checked that block, but it was good. Like, it got done good. Yep. It like he said, it builds the confidence, not just in you as the veteran, you know, in a new industry, but your team as well. Because it blew my mind when I first came into this industry that there were not any written standards. Other than IICRC and doing water mitigation stuff and infrared and the thermography, those guys, you know, they have certs.
But even those are guidelines. But even those are guidelines.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like I did Matt's show with him and Listen to This Bull, and we had Rachel Adams who helped write IICRC. Right. And everything that Matt and I were throwing at her, and I know Rachel off separately from that, and everything Matt was throwing at her, she said, no, it's a fucking guideline. Like, stop taking it so literal. And you're like, but the book says, you know, she's like, nope, it is open to interpretation. And you're like, I think that's what
industry in general is hungry for, because there are so
yield signs.
A lot of professions out there still have some sort of guidelines.
Yeah.
But so between, you know, NCI, you know, Jack Hanks, Vince Perry, Cal Spoon in the boot camp, and Melanie and them, I mean, just in the last couple of years, the access to education for this side of claims is phenomenal. Like, it's exciting times right now. Yes, it is very exciting times to be a public adjuster right now.
Well, and I started my PA firm in the middle of COVID.
That was. Yeah, we started ours. Complete Adjusting Services was the first one I helped build. That was with Big Mo, because we were together in Cal's boot camp. He was like, hey, help me build this thing. I was like, all right. There's no standards, no guidelines out there. Fuck, we will do this. We built a firm in the middle of COVID. And we went from, there was 3 of us. And by the time Hurricane Laura hit, shortly after Laura, we were up to 13.
Yeah.
And now it's still going. It's still chugging. It's still doing fantastic. And they've got more than it's a great time to be doing insurance.
And I know even right. And I think COVID is fucked up as it all was. I think it catalyzed a lot of that. Right. And so it pushed a bunch of people into a position where you had to overcome certain obstacles. Right. Yep. And then on the flip side, you saw that, hey, I can do a lot of this remotely. So then you're not necessarily putting yourself through a lot of that stress and strain if you don't have to. But the lack of operating procedures benefits prior service people. If we're being honest, again, unless you were in a garrison situation.
We can build it out of thin air.
Yep.
If it doesn't already exist, if it exists, we can help tweak it. If it doesn't exist, we can build it.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a few programs that exist now, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. But there's one now. And I'm going to find it. When I repost the video, I'll put it in a link or something. But there's a program right now that exists where they're allowing service members in their final 12 months of service to OJT in contracting companies, PA firms, anybody who carries a license, right? So you can utilize them as an apprentice, so to speak.
That would be awesome.
The government still pays their paycheck. They're not out anything. And then at the end of the 12 months, you don't have an obligation to keep them, or if they turn out to be a dud or whatever. But it's an opportunity that didn't exist when I got out. It was, hey, we're going to teach
that was
you
definitely not there 2 years ago.
We're going to help you write a resume and transition some of the skills that you have to the civilian world, which was garbage. They're now, and God, I got to find it because we're looking at it.
Because that would be awesome to look into.
Yeah. So it gives them the last 12 months of their time in service to be able to OJT, but it has to be in a profession that carries a license, right? So contracting license, cool. I would assume HVAC, plumbing, electrical, the trades, right? Oddly enough, PAs fall into that because we have to have licenses. That's so awesome. That's you can carry these people in, let them run underneath you for a year.
Yeah.
In a weird way, the government's still paying their paychecks, and you are not paying them. So it's an opportunity from the business perspective to gain a little bit of extra capital by not having to be obligated to pay for them, because you can't, even if you wanted to, you cannot pay for them. I'll find the name of it and I'll send it to you. But they just started it like 24 months ago. My brother's actually the one that told me about it. And, insert any state that has one, let alone Texas, with 4 different military bases, 4 major military bases.
I was going to say.
There is a pool of transitioning service members who are getting ready to get out of service. They have no idea what they're going to do. And you can just be like, hey, man, come with me, which is just like being in the military, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you.
Hey, guess what? You're being reassigned. You have now this job that you're going to take tomorrow, and you've had no training for it, but you'll do fine.
That's how I ended up in Afghanistan.
No, that would be awesome. Because then without them having to commit much into, investing into a full degree or anything like that, they can see if they like it.
Yeah.
And then, at the end, if they still want to be with you at the end of that, then, you got a pretty good employee or independent contractor, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good program. That was definitely not around.
Yeah. No. Again, it was a resume writing class and see you later. That was really all it was. We're rolling into the last few minutes here. So I always like to kind of close these out and say, if there's something that you could have told yourself when you got out to prep you for where you've landed, right? To shorten that, to streamline that, to something you wish that you would have known, do you have that? And I don't ever prep people for that question because I want it to be off the cuff. No. And I do it on purpose, right? I want it to be spontaneous. I want it to be not so thought out and calculated. No, what was it? Make sure you tie your shoes tight, right? Something so simple that people are overlooking, because it's easy to get lost in the over analyzing things when you get out.
Yeah, I was just about to say that would probably be pretty close to my answer. And I still have to tell myself this every day anyway, but don't overthink things. And what I mean by that is, had I not just gone with my gut when I thought, I really think I could make something of myself in this industry, had I sat and really stewed on it, on whether I could make it, not could I do the job, but make it in the industry. Had I probably, self-consciousness, a little bit of self-doubt could have creeped in there, but that gut feeling was there. And so I think just follow your gut.
Yeah.
If you really if your gut is telling you, just don't overthink it, go with that gut, you're probably going to be happy where you land. I'm so thankful that I did. I'd go back and tell myself again, I should have done it earlier. Really. Yeah. I should have jumped earlier.
And, and that rolls right back into, especially during deployment timeframes, right? You don't have time to process the shit.
No.
Right. And I mean, I know I've seen some of your Facebook stuff, you've done unmounted patrols, you've done all that stuff. So
lots of office stuff, lots of analyst stuff, but I was at the tactical level. So I got to get out there.
Yep.
I did some stuff with SF before females were allowed to become a part of that, because that part wasn't in place either, but there was a need. And it was just all right, I'll just go.
I'll go.
Where do you want me to be? This is when the Black Hawk leaves.
And when you're in that situation, you have to trust your gut. The moment, and so that's my parallel to what you said is, I always tell people, you can't just stand in the middle of the road. you're going to get run over 100% of the time. It's easier to fix a wrong choice than it is to suffer from no choice at all.
From paralysis, basically. Yep. Analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Jessica. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
this has been a great conversation. You know, I'm going to get that link sent to you. And unless you have anything else you want to add, I'm going to kick you out of the studio. Okay, awesome. Well, again, I appreciate your time, and we'll see you around here soon, I'm sure.
Yep. Bye.
All right, thank you. Bye. All right, that wraps up our show for the day. It was great having Jessica on here. She's incredibly knowledgeable. It was really cool to be able to bring in the officer's perspective of things. You don't really run across that a whole lot. So everybody who kind of jumped on here and watched and made some comments, I really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys all next week.